My wife forgot my birthday 3 times in a row and always wished her ex every year with sweet messages on social media. So I confronted her and she said, "He came first. I can't forget about him." So I smiled and walked away. What happened next was rather unbelievable. I will tell you everything. First, let me quickly thank you for your continuous support. This means a lot to us. If you enjoy the stories we share, kindly subscribe to this channel. It will be great if you can leave a comment on which city you are watching from. We might just give you a shout out in our next story. Today's special shout out goes to Elvis Goodman from Newcastle. We are glad you enjoy our stories. Now let's go deeper into the story. When I first met Clara, she was this rare kind of woman who seemed to be both deeply present and mysteriously distant at the same time. We were at a friend's housewarming party, back when I still went to those kinds of things. She stood by the window, sipping wine out of a chipped mug, her laugh threading through the noise like a melody I couldn't tune out. There was a comfort to her voice, low, deliberate, always seeming to understand more than she said. I remember how she looked at me like she was seeing something I hadn't even fully become yet. Back then, I was working long hours in IT, running on caffeine and ambition, but I was steady. I had my own place, a close circle of friends, and I had just started taking care of my mom's finances after her mild stroke. I was the dependable one. Clara, on the other hand, was still finishing grad school, always talking about Paris and old books and how she refused to live a life without poetry. I admired her for that, even if I didn't fully get it. When we started dating, I told myself that if I could just hold her attention, I'd be enough. And for a while I was. The first year of marriage was a quiet kind of magic. We weren't flashy. We didn't do grand gestures or post about each other online like some performative couple, but we had our rhythms. Late night cooking when neither of us could sleep. Walking to the bookstore on Sundays. Her handwriting on the notes she'd leave on the bathroom mirror, reminding me to drink more water, dummy. I thought we were building something steady. I thought I was giving her a safe place to land. I remember spending an entire Saturday planning her birthday the first year we were married. Tracked down her favorite obscure French chocolates, found a local artist to sketch a tiny portrait of the two of us, even bought tickets to that jazz show she once mentioned in passing. She cried when she saw it all, kissed me like I was the greatest man alive. That moment stayed with me. I carried it like a badge, proof that I knew how to love her right. So when my birthday rolled around that year, I didn't expect much. I'm not the type who makes a big deal about it anyway. But still, there was this quiet part of me that hoped she'd remember. Not for the gifts or the cake, but just to know I mattered enough to her for that. The day came and went. She didn't say a word. No breakfast in bed, no card, not even a casual happy birthday. At first, I thought maybe she was planning something late in the day, maybe a surprise dinner or a late-night toast. But the night ended with her falling asleep on the couch while rewatching some French indie film. I sat there for a while, just staring at the muted TV screen, wondering if I was being dramatic. People forget things. It happens. I told myself not to make a big deal out of it. The second year, I gave her an out. I reminded her the day before, casually mentioned how weird it was that my birthday was coming up again already. She smiled, said, "Oh wow, yeah, it's so soon," and changed the subject. I should have seen it then, should have known that the first time wasn't just a fluke. But denial's a hell of a drug. I held out hope. I woke up early that day, half expecting the smell of pancakes or maybe even just a note like the one she used to leave. But it was just silence. Not cold silence, just neutral. She didn't say anything. Again, I went to work that morning with this ache in my chest I couldn't quite name. Later that night, I scrolled through Instagram and saw she'd posted a happy birthday story for her ex, Elliot. A photo of him from college, laughing in black and white, captioned, "Some people leave a mark that never fades. Happy birthday, E." My stomach dropped. I stared at the screen like it was some kind of cruel joke. She hadn't just forgotten about me. She'd remembered him. I didn't say anything. I didn't trust myself to. What would I even say? "Hey, thanks for the birthday silence, but glad to see you're out here writing love poems to your ex." No, I swallowed it. Buried it. I told myself maybe she just forgot again. Maybe she meant nothing by the post. Maybe it was nostalgia. I excused it all, like I always did when it came to her. I loved her too much to believe she could love me so little. But that night, when I climbed into bed beside her and she didn't even look up from her book, something in me shifted. Just a little. A hairline crack in something I'd spent years convincing myself was unbreakable. By the third year, I stopped hoping. But the hurt didn't stop showing up, even when I tried to meet it with apathy. That morning, I got up and made coffee like usual. She was already scrolling on her phone, legs tucked under her on the couch. She looked up and asked if I could grab oat milk when I went out later. That was it. No happy birthday. No mention of the date. Just grocery errands. I nodded, walked out the door, and sat in my car for 10 whole minutes before I could start the engine. I didn't cry. I just felt hollow. Then, as if the universe couldn't help but twist the knife, I checked her social media on my lunch break. Another birthday message to Elliot. This one was even worse. Pictures from a beach trip they took years ago, captioned, "Some souls you never forget. Hope the ocean is kind to you today." That was the moment I knew. This wasn't forgetfulness. This wasn't clumsiness. It was a choice. She remembered him because she wanted to. She forgot me because she could. And for someone like me, who built a whole life around loyalty, consistency, showing up when it mattered, that was the deepest betrayal of all. She had a man who would have done anything for her, and she kept dragging ghosts into our marriage like they had more of a claim to her heart than I ever did. I didn't bring it up that night. I waited until the next evening when we were eating dinner, takeout on the couch, because she said she didn't feel like cooking. I turned to her and asked, "Why do you keep remembering his birthday, but not mine?" She blinked, caught off guard. Her fork froze midair. "What are you talking about?" she said. I kept my voice steady. 3 years in a row, Clara. You never said a word. But you post about him every year. Like clockwork. She stared at me for a long moment, then shrugged. He came first. I can't forget about him. And just like that, she told me everything I needed to know. I didn't yell. I didn't argue. I just smiled, a slow, aching kind of smile, the kind that comes when grief turns into clarity. I nodded, stood up, and walked away. Not out of drama, not out of rage, but because something inside me had finally, quietly broken. And in that silence, I understood something I'd been running from for too long. If she couldn't choose me fully, she didn't deserve me at all. The morning after I walked away from her and that hollow excuse, "He came first," was quiet. Too quiet. Clara moved around the apartment like it was any other day, like she hadn't just carved something permanent into the silence between us. She didn't ask why I didn't say goodnight. She didn't follow me to the spare room where I slept on top of a bundled blanket and a pillow that still smelled faintly of her shampoo. She just went to bed like she always did, as if nothing had happened, like I was just overreacting again. That was her pattern, really. She had this talent for minimizing things, making me feel like my hurt was inconvenient. I used to fall for it, question my reactions, check myself in the mirror of her dismissiveness, and wonder if I really was being too sensitive. But that morning, something in me had changed. I woke up still angry, but it was a clean kind of anger, like something rotten had finally been scraped out of me, leaving only clarity behind. She was standing in the kitchen in one of my old hoodies, stirring her tea like she hadn't gutted me with a single sentence the night before. "Want some?" she asked, without looking up. That used to be the kind of question that made me feel warm. I used to think, she still thinks of me. But that morning, it just felt insulting. I didn't answer. I just picked up my keys, slipped on my shoes, and walked out the door. I wasn't going anywhere important. I just needed air. I drove around aimlessly, thinking about all the birthdays she had skipped, all the days I had shown up for her, the small notes, the little surprises, the way I remembered that her mom died the same week as her midterms one year, so I'd always make sure to do something extra kind in April. I remembered every detail because she mattered to me. But clearly, I didn't matter enough to her to remember the simplest thing about me. The third time she forgot my birthday, it wasn't even just forgetting. It was avoidance. She had posted a throwback video of her and Elliot on the beach, laughing, wind in their hair, tangled up in a moment that had nothing to do with the life we built. The caption had read, "The kind of love that lives in your bones. Happy birthday, E." I read it over and over, like a fool, hoping there was some nuance I was missing. But there wasn't. It was there, in plain text. That wasn't just a memory. That was longing. That was reverence. And it was public. She honored him for the world to see, while forgetting the man who slept beside her every night. I tried to justify it to myself in the past. Maybe Elliot had died. I had asked early in our relationship, and she said no. They had just gone different directions. Maybe she was holding on to an old version of herself. Maybe it was harmless nostalgia. But nostalgia doesn't excuse betrayal. And it sure as hell doesn't excuse silence. Love isn't about grand gestures. It's about consistency. It's about choosing someone every day, especially when it's not convenient. Especially when it's easy to forget. I was there. I was real. But she was still in love with a ghost. When I came home that afternoon, she was gone. Left a note on the counter. Went to yoga. We'll talk later? I didn't respond. Instead, I picked up my phone and called Marcus, my old college friend turned lawyer. I hadn't spoken to him in a while, but when he answered and heard my voice, he knew something was wrong. You good? He asked. I sat down at the kitchen table, stared at the ring on my finger, and said, I need to file for divorce. Today. There was a long pause on the line. Are you sure? He asked, his voice softer now. You want to talk it through first? But I was done talking. I was done hoping. I was done bleeding for someone who couldn't even remember the day I was born. I'm sure, I said, and I meant it. By the time Clara came back from yoga, the papers were drafted. I didn't tell her right away. I waited until the next morning. I left them on the kitchen table with a yellow sticky note that said, You made your choice. Here's mine. I heard her wake up, shuffle into the kitchen, pour herself water. Then silence. I was in the spare room, packing a small bag. Just enough for a few days. I didn't need to be there for the scene. I already knew how it would play out. She'd be shocked, then angry. She'd twist it. Make it about me being reactionary, unreasonable, maybe even cruel. But I didn't care anymore. I wasn't waiting for her to validate my pain. I had carried this marriage on my back for years, and it was finally time to put it down. When I walked out into the living room, she was sitting at the table, the papers in front of her, her hands shaking. You're divorcing me? She said, as if the idea had never crossed her mind. I met her eyes, and for the first time in months, I felt nothing. No guilt. No confusion. Just resolve. You already divorced me, I said, my voice calm. You just did it in pieces. She stood up, her face flushed, defensive. This is about a birthday? You're ending our marriage over a date. I laughed, not because it was funny, but because the absurdity of her saying that out loud was too much. It's not about a birthday, Clara. It's about the fact that for 3 years, you made me invisible. And all that time, you were still in love with someone else. You didn't forget me. You just didn't choose me. She didn't argue after that. Maybe because she knew I was right. Or maybe because there was nothing left to say. I left the apartment that day with a backpack, a clear head, and a heart that finally felt like it was beating for someone who mattered, me. There's a particular kind of silence that follows a confrontation. Thick, hanging, awkward, and it settled over our apartment like smoke after a house fire. Clara didn't speak for the first 2 days after I left the divorce papers. She didn't call, didn't text, didn't even send one of her passive-aggressive emails she used to type out when we argued, full of vague philosophy and half-baked justifications. Nothing. It was as if the moment forced her to reckon with something she'd always believed she could avoid. That I was capable of walking away. That I was no longer willing to be her second choice. It's a strange thing when the person you built your life around suddenly realizes you've taken your power back. And instead of chasing you, they just sit in their own stunned silence, watching the space where you used to stand. I was staying at my friend Joel's place, a spare room in his loft downtown, filled with records, secondhand furniture, and the kind of supportive chaos only a best friend can offer. Joel didn't ask questions the first night. He just handed me a beer, turned on the game, and let me sit there in silence. But by day 3, he finally broke it. You sure she's not going to try and talk you out of it? He asked, flipping through vinyls while I sat on the floor with my laptop. I shrugged. If she does, it's already too late. I heard everything I needed when she said he came first. Joel raised an eyebrow. She really said that? I nodded, jaw clenched. Like it was nothing. Like that made it okay. He didn't say anything else. Just dropped the needle on some old soul record and let the music speak for both of us. That's the thing about true friends. They know when you need words, and when you need space to feel what the words can't fix. On the 5th day, she called. I let it ring. Then came the texts, short, stiff at first. Can we talk? I didn't expect this. Are you really serious? I didn't respond. Not because I was being cruel, but because I had nothing left to say. Everything that mattered had already been said, or not said, for years. But she kept going. By the 7th day, the messages turned emotional. I didn't mean it like that. You know I love you. That one made me laugh out loud. Not because it was funny, but because it was the first time in years she'd even said it without being prompted. Then came the guilt. You're really going to throw away everything over a stupid birthday? And just like that, she reminded me exactly why I was done. It wasn't about the birthday. It never was. It was about the pattern, the neglect, the emotional crumbs she thought I should survive on while she saved her best for a man who wasn't even around. I agreed to meet her a few days later, more out of curiosity than hope. We chose a neutral place, some cafe in Midtown we used to go to back when things were still sweet, before everything turned obligatory and performative. I got there early, as usual, and took the table by the window. She showed up 10 minutes late, also as usual. With that rushed apology on her lips, she always offered like it absolved everything. Sorry, traffic was awful, she said, sliding into the seat across from me. I just nodded. She looked tired, more than usual. No makeup, hair half-tied, a scarf pulled tight around her neck like she was trying to keep something from falling apart. We sat in silence for a bit, both pretending to scan the menu neither of us was going to order from. Then she spoke. So this is really what you want? She asked, voice low. I met her eyes and nodded. It's not about what I want anymore. It's about what I need. She scoffed, leaned back in her chair. And you need to walk away from your marriage? Just like that. I felt my jaw tighten. Clara, I've been walking alone in this marriage for years. You just never noticed. That shut her up for a moment. Then she leaned forward, arms on the table, voice softer. I didn't mean to hurt you. Elliot and I had history. He mattered to me. I can't erase that. I stared at her, and for the first time, I realized she really didn't get it. I never asked you to erase him, I said quietly. I asked you to choose me. You had a husband standing in front of you, year after year, and you left him in the shadow of a man who didn't even bother to stick around. Her eyes narrowed. That's not fair. You knew I had a past. I nodded. Everyone has a past. But you turned yours into a pedestal, and I was never more than the safety net under it. She looked down at her hands, fingers fidgeting with the ring she still wore. I noticed she hadn't taken it off. Maybe she thought it meant something. Maybe she hoped the ring could say what she no longer could. The server came by, dropped off waters, and left just as quickly. Clara didn't touch hers. I never meant to choose him over you, she said, barely above a whisper. But you did, I replied. Over and over again. You chose memories. You chose nostalgia. You chose to make him a permanent part of our life without ever asking me if I was okay with that. You chose silence on the days that mattered most to me. She looked up at me then, eyes glistening, mouth trembling. But I didn't waver. I had cried too many times in private for her tears to change anything now. Is there someone else? She asked suddenly, her voice sharp with suspicion. I almost laughed again. No. And it's sad that your first instinct is to assume there must be. Maybe that's why this fell apart. You stopped seeing me as someone worth loving without a rival. She looked like she wanted to argue, to protest, to say something cutting or clever. But nothing came. Just silence. When we finally stood to leave, she reached out, touched my arm. Please don't do this. We can fix it. I looked at her hand on me and gently pulled away. You don't fix a broken vase by ignoring the cracks until it shatters. I turned and walked out. I didn't look back. That night, I sat on Joel's old leather couch, watching the city lights flicker through his living room window. I wasn't happy, not yet, but I felt clean, honest. Like for the first time in a long time, I wasn't pretending anymore. I had finally chosen myself. And no matter how lonely that choice felt in the moment, I knew it was the only one that could ever lead me home. I knew there would be fallout. You don't walk away from a marriage, especially one that looked picture perfect from the outside, without people forming their own stories. But I underestimated just how loud the whispers could be. Within a week of filing, My phone started buzzing with curious messages. Not concerned, not supportive, just curious. The kind of messages that start with, "Hey, hope you're okay," and end with, "What happened between you and Clara?" They weren't really questions. They were bait. Invitations to confirm or deny the rumors Clara was already planting like seeds in a well-manicured garden of half-truths. The first person to actually say something to my face was Lacey, one of Clara's old college friends who used to come over for wine nights and always left red lipstick stains on our wine glasses. She cornered me at the grocery store, of all places, right in the middle of the produce aisle. "You really blindsided her," she said, arms crossed, like she was scolding a teenager. "She's been crying for days. She said she didn't even see it coming." I stared at her, wondering how many versions of Clara's story she had swallowed without question. "Then she wasn't paying attention," I said flatly. "Because I've been walking out of that marriage for years. One forgotten moment at a time." Lacey's eyes narrowed. "You know, just because she didn't celebrate your birthday doesn't mean she didn't love you." I smiled then, tight, bitter, exhausted. Then maybe she should have loved me like it meant something. By the second week, the emotional fatigue started to settle into my bones. Not from the divorce itself, that felt like a release, but from the pressure to justify it to people who had only ever seen the highlight reel. Clara was smart. She didn't go online and trash me. No angry posts or sob stories. She was subtle, strategic, just a few carefully worded captions. A photo of a sunset with a quote about heartbreak. A repost of a memory of us from 2 years ago with the words, "Some people give up too soon." It was the kind of thing that invited sympathy without explanation. And of course, the comments poured in. "You deserve better," they said. If he left, he wasn't the one. I didn't respond. I didn't defend myself. Because the truth didn't need an audience. It just needed a spine. Joel saw it happening. One night we were sitting on his balcony, drinking whiskey like we were back in college, and he pulled out his phone. "You seen this?" he asked, showing me a screenshot of Clara's latest post. It was a photo of a flower wilting in a glass jar. The caption read, "Love without water can't grow." I took a sip of my drink, stared at the skyline. She really thinks she's the victim. Joel leaned back in his chair, kicked his feet up. People always do when they're the ones who ignored the warning signs. Makes it easier than admitting they let it rot. I nodded. I gave her everything I had. And when that wasn't enough, she made me feel like I was the one failing. Joel didn't argue. He just raised his glass. To the ones who finally walk away. We drank in silence after that. But the worst part wasn't the social fallout. It was the family fallout. My mother called, confused and tentative. She adored Clara, or at least the version of Clara she was shown. "Are you sure this can't be fixed?" she asked, her voice soft, worried. "I always thought you two were so strong." I could hear the hope in her voice, the fear that maybe her son was giving up on something good. So I told her the truth, not all of it, but enough. I told her about the birthdays, the posts about Elliot, the way Clara made me feel invisible in a marriage I was constantly trying to hold together. My mother was quiet for a long time. Then she sighed. "I'm proud of you," she said. "You stayed longer than most would have. But sometimes walking away is the strongest thing you can do." That was the first time I let myself cry, not out of regret, but out of relief. Because for the first time in weeks, someone saw the pain and didn't try to make it prettier than it was. Clara, of course, wasn't done. A few days later, she showed up at my work. No call, no warning, just walked into the lobby like she still had a place in my life. I was coming back from a client meeting when I saw her, standing by the front desk, wearing that navy coat I bought her for Christmas. My heart didn't race. My stomach didn't drop. I just felt tired. "What are you doing here?" I asked. She gave me a look that almost made me feel guilty. "Almost. I needed to see you. You won't answer my texts." I glanced at the receptionist, who was awkwardly pretending not to listen, and nodded toward the side exit. We stepped outside into the cool afternoon air. "I miss you," she said, her voice cracking. "I miss us." I looked at her for a long moment. "You miss what you think we had. But the version you loved was the one where I never asked for anything. Where I just took whatever scraps you offered." Her eyes filled with tears. "That's not true." I didn't blink. "It is. You didn't choose me when it mattered. And now that I'm gone, you're mourning the control, not the connection." She reached out, Touch my arm. Can't we at least talk? Try again. I stepped back. You already had years to try. You just didn't think I'd ever leave. That night, I blocked her number. Healing didn't come with a grand epiphany. It wasn't some cinematic moment where I looked in the mirror and suddenly loved myself again. No, it was slow, uneven, sometimes painful in ways I couldn't predict. Some mornings I woke up feeling free, like I had shed a second skin I didn't know I'd been wearing for years. Other mornings, I stared at the ceiling too long, wondering if I was just lonely or if I missed her. I didn't miss her love, exactly. I missed the version of me that still believed she had it. That innocent man who still hoped that effort would be enough. I mourned him more than I mourned the marriage. Because losing Clara had been slow and quiet. But finding myself again? That was louder and more complicated. I moved into a small apartment on the edge of the city, nothing fancy, just clean and quiet. A single bedroom, a balcony that overlooked a street where the trees turned orange in the fall, and a kitchen where I learned to cook for one without feeling pathetic about it. At first, I hated the silence. Every clink of a dish, every footstep echoed. No laughter down the hallway. No sound of another person's toothbrush in the morning. But slowly, I started to enjoy it. I played music when I cooked. I left the balcony door open and listened to the city breathe. I slept diagonally in my bed because no one was there to take up space. And for the first time in a long time, I didn't feel like I was disappearing inside my own home. I started going back to the gym, not out of revenge or some cliché glow-up story, but because I needed something to focus on that wasn't emotional. Something with numbers and reps and clear progress. I needed to feel strong again, not just in body, but in mind. There was something comforting about lifting weight and knowing it was heavy and hard, but that I could handle it. That repetition turned into ritual, and ritual turned into recovery. I'd leave the gym sore, but proud, because every drop of sweat was mine. Not something I did to impress or win someone back, but for me. Only me. One night, after a long workout, I came home, tossed my keys on the counter, and found myself scrolling through old photos. Not to torture myself, but because I wanted to see if I felt anything. I didn't. There were pictures of us in Paris, us at my nephew's birthday party, us at home on the couch. Her head on my chest, my arm around her like I was holding my whole world in place. And yet, as I stared at them, I realized that even in those moments, I had been alone, smiling through silence, holding on to someone who had already emotionally left. Those photos weren't proof of love. They were proof of effort. And most of that effort had come from me. Still, I didn't close myself off. I didn't turn bitter. That was the part one was most proud of. I let people in again, slowly, cautiously. I started saying yes to dinner invitations. I met friends for drinks, went to my brother's baby shower, even joined a weekend hiking group just to feel something new. That's where I met Hannah. She wasn't flashy. She didn't walk in and light up the room like Clara once did. No, she was different. Quiet in the best way. Thoughtful. Observant. The kind of woman who noticed when someone was drinking too little water or needed sunscreen, but didn't ask. She just handed it to you. She wasn't trying to be adored. She was just present. And presence, after years of emotional absence, felt like wealth. Our first real conversation happened on a trail break. She noticed I was sitting a little apart from the group, just sipping water and watching the trees. She sat next to me without a word, then after a few minutes said, "You always think this much? Or is it the altitude?" I laughed, really laughed, for the first time in what felt like forever. We talked the rest of the hike. About nothing and everything. And for the first time, I didn't feel like I had to perform. I didn't have to prove my worth. I didn't have to earn her attention. She listened. And when she spoke, it wasn't about the past or some ghost she hadn't let go of. It was about where she was, who she was becoming, and what she hoped for, not in me, but in herself. We started seeing each other casually after that. No declarations. No rushing. Just long walks, shared meals, occasional movie nights that ended with her falling asleep with her feet tucked under me. She remembered my birthday. The first year, she didn't throw a party or write a poem. She just made me dinner, my favorite, steak and garlic mashed potatoes, and handed me a small card that said, "You matter. Not just today." I almost cried reading it. Because it was simple, but it was intentional. And after everything I'd been through, Intention was the deepest form of love I could imagine. The day the divorce was finalized, I didn't feel anything. No pain, no anger, just peace. Clara didn't show up to court. She signed everything quietly, probably still curating her image somewhere, still posting things that made people wonder what went wrong. But I didn't care anymore. Her narrative didn't belong to me. Her grief, if she ever truly felt it, was hers to carry. I had already carried more than my share. Later that night, Hannah came over with wine and a smile that didn't ask for anything. We sat on the floor of my living room, laughing about something stupid, probably a TikTok video she sent me. I looked at her, and something inside me settled. Not because I had moved on, or because I needed someone to fill the void, but because I had created a space where love could exist without hurt, without ghosts, without me begging to be seen. For the first time, I wasn't trying to prove I was worthy of love. I just was. There's a certain stillness that settles into your life after you finally stop chasing people who never meant to stay. Not an empty stillness, but a calming one, like the silence after a storm when the air smells clean again. That's what my life became in the years that followed. Steady, clear, honest. I didn't expect to fall in love again, not really. I thought maybe I'd date here and there, maybe learn to enjoy my own company a little more. But Hannah changed that. Not by filling a void, but by reminding me that love doesn't have to be earned through suffering. She didn't rush me, didn't ask for more than I could give. She showed up, consistently, until one day I realized I'd stopped checking the rearview mirror for Clara. I wasn't afraid of being forgotten anymore. Because for the first time, I was remembered without asking. We got married on a quiet autumn afternoon. Nothing grand. No rented ballroom or 10-tier cake. Just a backyard filled with string lights, soft jazz playing in the background, and a group of people who had seen me at my worst and still showed up to witness my beginning. Joel was my best man. He gave a speech that made everyone laugh, then cry, then laugh again. My mother stood beside Hannah's as they lit candles during the ceremony, their hands shaking but proud. And when Hannah walked down that makeshift aisle in a dress as simple as her spirit, I didn't feel nervous. I didn't feel scared. I felt home. Not the kind of home built on obligation or image, but the kind built on truth. A year later, we had our daughter, Lila. She came into the world with strong lungs and even stronger eyes. Big, curious, always watching. The first time I held her, I cried. Not because I was overwhelmed, but because I finally understood what it meant to be chosen without conditions. Lila didn't need me to be impressive or selfless or endlessly forgiving. She just needed me to be present. And in that moment, every bruise left by Clara faded a little more. Because now, I wasn't just healing for myself. I was building something that would never require anyone to beg for love. Every birthday since has been loud. Not with noise, but with warmth. Hannah never forgets. Sometimes it's a handwritten letter tucked under my pillow. Sometimes it's a pancake breakfast with Lila banging spoons on the table. Sometimes it's a photo album of small moments we shared throughout the year, notes she secretly gathered and printed. But it's never about the gesture. It's the intention, the remembering, the quiet message. You are seen. You are valued. You are loved. And I never have to wonder if I matter. I never have to search her face for signs of regret. I never have to scroll through her phone, holding my breath, praying I won't see someone else's name immortalized in a caption. Because there are no ghosts here, only roots. And now, with a wife who loves me out loud and a daughter who clings to my finger like it's her lifeline, I finally have the sky I spent years praying for. One day, while going through old boxes in the garage, I found a photo from our honeymoon. Me and Clara standing in front of the ocean, arms around each other, fake smiles on tired faces. I almost threw it out. But something made me pause. Not because I wanted to keep it, but because I wanted to remember how far I had come. That photo wasn't love, it was performance. A snapshot of two people who looked like a couple, but felt like strangers. I kept it, but I didn't frame it. I tucked it into a drawer, beneath new pictures. Not out of bitterness, but as a reminder of what I survived, of what I'll never go back to. Lila's first birthday was different from any birthday I'd experienced before. Not just because it was hers, but because it marked a full-circle moment for me. The day before, I sat on the porch with Hannah, watching the sun dip behind the trees while Lila napped inside. I turned to her and said, I used to dread birthdays. They were reminders that I was invisible to the one person who was supposed to know me best. She looked at me, eyes soft, and said, well, now they're reminders that you're everything to the people who know you right. I didn't respond. I just reached for her hand, held it tight, and let the gratitude sit heavy in my chest. Because she was right. I was chosen. Every day, and I would never forget how that felt. That night, I tucked Lila into bed, kissed her forehead, and whispered, you'll never have to wonder if you're loved. Because that's what this was all about in the end. Not revenge, not proving anything to Clara, not even healing. It was about building something real. About making sure the next generation didn't inherit the wounds I had to stitch closed myself. I walked out of a marriage that should have felt like safety, and now I was standing in a life that did. And every single step, every moment of doubt, every tear, every lonely night, had led me here. To a woman who chose me. To a child who needed me. To a man I could finally be proud of. If you've ever had to walk away from someone who couldn't love you fully, know this. Your peace is not selfish. You deserve to be remembered without asking, to be chosen without begging. Drop a comment if you've ever had to start over and found something better on the other side. Let's talk about healing, real love, and the strength it takes to finally choose yourself. And if this story resonated with you, don't forget to like, share, and subscribe for more real-life stories that hit where it hurts and heal where it matters. See you soon in the next story.